Hello to all the debt warriors out there, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. I'm your host, Katie Fatta, and in today's episode, we'll be tackling some current events. Today, we're going to be talking about the financial impact of the COVID-19 crisis, and specifically what millennials and Gen Zers can do to help themselves survive financially during this time. There's no doubt that this is a scary time for everyone, not just millennials and Gen Zers, because so many people are being impacted personally by this pandemic. I think it's important that we discuss this on Millennial Debt Domination because it's a crucial financial current event that's happening. So for my guest today, it's Diane Gray, who is the Vice President of Counseling and Education at Navicore Solutions. We'll be talking about student loans, unemployment, the relief bill, and other financial topics relating to the coronavirus. Now, let's get to Diane. How are you?
Hi, Katie. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to everybody about what they can do during this COVID-19 crisis.
Yeah, it's definitely a hot topic right now. So I felt like it was definitely important to cover it in Millennial Debt Domination. So in this podcast, we're really zoning in on 18 to the 35-year-old age range. And when you think of that age group, they're doing anything from working to studying and even raising a family. So there's a lot to consider. The statistics of COVID-19 crisis are staggering. A recent Wallet Hub survey found that 67 million Americans will struggle to pay their bills because of the pandemic, and that's a huge percentage of the country. And the numbers are just likely to go up and increase. There's now a relief bill in place that'll help Americans struggling financially because of the crisis. So can you explain how the relief bill can help?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the relief bill is very important because COVID-19 does not discriminate. So this is something that's going to help the majority of Americans in our communities. So let's break down what can be done to ease the financial burden over the course of the next few months. So by now, I think that most people are aware that the president signed the pandemic relief bill on March 27th. So I'm going to go through the steps with everybody so they can better understand how it applies to them. The relief bill includes a one-time payment of up to $1,200 per adult earning $75,000 or less. This will be determined by the 2018 tax return or the 2019 tax return if you've already filed it. If you're married, earning less than $150,000 per year collectively, you'll receive a check for $2,400. So it's $1,200 for each of you. And if you have children, you'll receive an extra $500 per child. In addition, allocation of the payments will phase out at a rate of $5 per every additional $100 in income over the $75,000 benchmark. And for singles, it's $112,500 for heads of household and $150,000 for married couples filing jointly. So many people are asking, when am I going to get this relief? When is it coming? And what the government has indicated is that checks will be directly deposited into a bank account if you included direct deposit information on your tax forms. Okay. If you didn't, the checks are going to be mailed out, and that could take a bit longer. So they're anticipating the direct deposit taking place within the next couple of weeks, but the mailed payments may actually take a couple of months. Oh, wow. So everybody should be aware of that as they're anticipating when the relief's going to come, and they're factoring that into their financial situation.
Yeah, definitely. And so a lot of people are definitely financially struggling right now because they might be out of a job at this point, and it's hard to go from a steady income to no income. It's a major adjustment. So during this time, they can file for unemployment. So they have some sort of means to live on. So can you just kind of go into how someone can file for unemployment during this time?
Yes, and I think you make a great point. I think
Mhm.
that a lot of people have been shocked by the
Mhm.
timing of everything. These unemployment filings were unexpected for most people. And it's, again, the virus doesn't discriminate. It's hitting all populations of people with various levels of income. So,
Right.
yeah, so as part of this pandemic relief bill, unemployment benefits will be bolstered for 4 months, and it increases the maximum unemployment benefit that the state gives to a person by $600 a week. So, regardless again of your income, you would receive that additional $600 per week payment in unemployment benefits. Additionally, the benefits will be extended to those who typically do not qualify for such benefits, and that includes freelancers, gig economy workers, and furloughed employees. So there's a big expansion there in eligibility. Um, with regard to the 600, there is a little bit of a downside in that it will take 2 to 3 weeks longer to get that particular portion of the payment. So the standard unemployment amount is coming from the state, and then this additional $600 payment will come thereafter, that initial payment from the state.
Right. It'll definitely take some adjusting too, for people who have lost their job during this time to live on the unemployment and everything. So I think it's also definitely important to readjust your budget weekly during this crisis. Do you agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah.
A recent poll found that 18% of households reported at least one person in the household being laid off or having reduced hours. So in some homes, this may mean that only one or all income earners are without a job. So certainly there's going to be an adjustment period for many families. And you have to take into account this additional revenue or income to offset some of the loss that a lot of these families are experiencing.
Yeah, it's crucial to file for unemployment during this time because you don't want to be charging everything on your credit cards because you're going to still have to pay them back eventually. So, what do you think are some ways people can keep track of their finances during this time so they don't find themselves in a serious financial hardship because they're just charging everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for everyone to make a list of all of their expenses and categorize those expenses into needs and then kind of the non necessities. So when we're taking a look at the needs and prioritizing them, of course, people want to take a look at the roof over their head, how much their rent or mortgage payment is, and then what potential relief options are available in that area. And then families should take a look at utility expenses and potential options for those as well. Transportation, obviously, food is very critical. So, categorizing everything and then prioritizing expenses is going to be critical at this time. And then taking a look at what employment income you're eligible for. Factor in the additional 600, but factor in the time that it may take for you to receive that. I think you made a great point. You should not rack up the credit card debt at this
Mhm.
time. I think if you have to live, it's something that you have to carefully consider with your family. But I think that, certainly prioritizing and categorizing expenses is important.
Right. And what do you think about people using their emergency funds during this time? Do you think people should, or should they be careful about it? What's your advice?
I mean, I think this is certainly an emergency. And when you think
Hmm.
about an emergency fund, that's what it's there for. But you have to be careful about exhausting it completely because there could be other things that crop up that you may need to use it for. And then you also want to think about how you're going to replenish it in the future. I know that everyone's thinking about the now. And because we're in a crisis, everyone's thinking about how am I going to overcome this in the immediate term? And yes, using your emergency fund for certain expenses by looking at your priority list could be a way to help you through this. but also thinking about the future and how you're going to replenish it would be very important.
Right. And then, so a lot of people listening to this podcast are millennials and Gen Zers, and a big monthly payment for us is our student loans. So I know now that they've kind of been put on hold for a good, till September. So do you want to just go over the new student loan situation that's going on?
Yes, yes. The good news is that the administration announced on March 13th that federally held student loans will cease accruing interest until September 30th. So that's good. This pause is automatic. You don't have to go out of your way to apply or opt into it. If you've already made your payment for March, you can request a refund by contacting your servicer. Most federal loan interest will be changed to 0% during this time. So payments will resume October 2020, and your servicers will need to contact you by August to remind you of the 2020 reinstatement. I want to make a note, though, that not all federal loans qualify for these new benefits, although most of them do. There is a caveat there, and that not all. The only loans that don't qualify are commercially held federal family education loans, Perkins loans, owned by your college, and private loans.
Okay. And then what about after the after this is all over, how can, and someone might not be able to still pay their bill or their student loan come October, what can they do then?
I would recommend that they reach out to their servicer to look into applying for other types of student loan forgiveness. So if you're currently in an income-driven repayment plan, then suspended payments will still qualify for the forgiveness. You can also look into deferment, forbearance, changing the amount that you typically would have to pay by enrolling in an income-driven repayment plan. So those are just some of the options you can kind of take a look into. There's also looking into whether or not you want to apply for the extended or graduated repayment plans. And then there's also another option in that you can look at an unemployment deferment. And you can get this deferment if you're working less than 30 hours a week and actively seeking full-time employment.
Okay. Yeah, so what would you suggest for someone who has private student loans instead of the federal student loans where this situation doesn't apply to them? Their loans won't be deferred.
I would definitely recommend reaching out to the loan provider and seeing what options are available. Many banks and many servicers are offering programs right now, hardship programs, because of the countrywide crisis. So I think reaching out and communicating with your servicer is extremely important at this time. And that just doesn't go for student loans. I think that goes for every type of account that you may have. I think it extends, starting with your mortgage, communicating with your mortgage holder, your mortgage servicer, your hardship and the financial impact this is having is going to be important to look into whether or not there's any forbearance programs with your mortgage, and also communicating with your credit card companies and making sure that they know that you've been impacted financially is going to be important.
Yeah, definitely. And student loans are a main reason as to why millennials and Gen Zers are in debt. And a lot of millennials, including myself, use their tax return to make extra payments on their student loans. And since this crisis just happens to be happening right during tax season, what does this mean for our taxes this year?
Yes, so the federal government has extended both the deadline to file and pay your taxes to July 15th this year. However, if you are expecting a refund, the sooner you file your return, the sooner you'll receive that refund. So you don't want to hold off until the July 15th deadline, because then you're putting off the refund that you would anticipate receiving. And it sounds like most people need that sooner rather than later. So, and I think that, if you do receive a refund, carefully determining where you want to apply that money is going to be important. And, looking at that list of expenses and the priority levels of those expenses will come into play.
Yeah, this refund check will be definitely different than any other refund check that people have received, because normally, like when I get it, I do put it most of it towards like my student loans, making extra payments. But some people definitely might have to budget for this one, right? And maybe they can incorporate it into, their weekly spendings more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know people that wait for their refund check every year and they put it in a
Yeah.
vacation fund, and I don't think
Mm-hmm.
that that's going to be happening very
Right.
often at this
Some,
time. And I think, yeah, I think the refund checks are going to be going more towards some of those critical
yeah,
expenses.
like the
Mhm.
essentials,
Yeah,
especially, right, definitely, especially later millennials who have kids and stuff like that, that has to go towards that this year.
absolutely.
Yeah. There's still so many people out there who are struggling with they can't pay the balance on their credit cards during this time, or they now find themselves in more debt than what they're usually used to, because like we were kind of saying earlier, even people who might be careful with spending on their credit cards, they might be charging a lot more on credit cards now these days. So what can someone do who is in this situation now that finds themselves having more credit card debt, or just debt in general, than they're used to having?
Yeah, I think it might be a great time for those individuals to seek credit counseling. You
Mhm.
know, full disclosure, that's what we do at Navicore Solutions. We're a nonprofit credit counseling agency. So, for those that are having a hard time with debt and balancing the budget, the bills, and the income, reaching out for a credit counseling session would be a great idea, because we'll take you through that process of identifying the expenses and the income and figuring out ways where you can balance everything and lead a financially stable life.
Yeah. And I sometimes people might think that like enrolling in credit counseling, they don't want to do it because they don't necessarily want to talk about their finances. But I think now, if you think you need help, it's a great time to do it and at least look into the program and give us a call.
Yeah, and it's completely confidential. And the
Mm-hmm.
session can take place in the privacy of your home by phone. So, it's completely anonymous in that sense. And I think, I think it's important to reach out for help. And again, it's part of the communication, it's part of realizing that there is a financial impact because of everything that's going on, and taking the steps to do something about it. And credit counseling can be an important part of that, and a great step to take.
Yeah, most people who have they have a credit counseling they'll feel instant relief. So like having a credit counselor on your side during this time can be super beneficial for reducing financial anxiety. So, do you have any final thoughts you want to share about the COVID crisis going on right now?
I mean, just that everybody's really in this together. And this is impacting so many families across the country. And, it's nothing to be ashamed of. And I think that people have to realize that there is help available, and there are hardship programs available to get everybody through this financially. Um, we didn't talk about medical debt, and I think that that's also something that could put a strain on the financial position of many families if they are impacted health wise by the virus.
Mhm.
And that is also something that, credit counseling can help with, is addressing that medical debt. But we're all in this together. We'll all get through it, and there will be a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I definitely think a lot of people right now don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it stresses them out. I know I'm the type of person, I just wish there would be I saw the light, but we just have to get through this together.
We do, we really do. And when I think about, because I've been doing this for a really long time, and I think about the housing crisis, and I think about the feeling of helplessness at that time during that crisis, and everything that families and community members went through. And it feels very similar, although very different. It does feel very similar. And we got through that, and families rebounded and were able to keep their homes. And I think that this is just something that's going to take time, but eventually everyone will be okay.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest today on the podcast. You shared some great information on your side of the crisis. So I think this was definitely a topic I wanted to cover. So I'm glad that you were my guest today.
Great. Thanks so much, Katie.
Thank you.
Stay
All
safe, stay
right.
well.
Yes, thank you. The COVID-19 pandemic is a hard topic to talk about, and Diane was an amazing guest to have on to talk about the financial aspects of the crisis. There are steps you can take to help your financial life during this time. If you've been furloughed or laid off completely from your job, file for unemployment and take advantage of the pause on your student loan payments. As Diane and I mentioned, continue to reevaluate your budget every week during this crisis. So you guys know I normally recommend a budget reevaluation at the end of the month, but during these uncertain times, it's good to check in on your budget every week. So this is because if you're making less money now than what you're used to, you can see where you can cut spending. And make sure you're only spending money on essential items. You might find yourself bored and online shopping more, but only keep it to browsing and not actually spending money on things that you don't absolutely need right now. It's also good to mention that if you're really struggling with debt right now, don't be afraid or embarrassed to reach out for help. Navicore Solutions is a certified credit counseling company that will set you up with a personalized debt management plan. So I'll put all of our information in the podcast description so you can check us out at Navicore Solutions if you're struggling with your new debt. I want to thank Diane for taking time out of her day to talk with us today and for being a guest on the podcast. That's it for another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts and rate and review us on iTunes. 5 stars would be great. See you next time, Millennials, Gen Zers, and everyone else listening.